We call it the cloud, as if it floats somewhere above us, weightless, invisible, almost magical. You upload a file, it appears somewhere else. You launch an application, it responds instantly. You deploy a business, customers can access it from anywhere. But there is no cloud, not really. There are buildings, servers, networks, electricity, cooling systems, massive industrial facilities. The cloud is simply a new way of accessing them. And that distinction matters, because somewhere along the way, businesses stopped buying the machines. They started renting access to them.
There was a time when building software meant buying hardware. A company needed servers, so it bought servers. It needed storage, so it bought storage. It needed networking equipment, so it built the network. Then came the physical constraints. Where should the machines live? Who maintains them? Who replaces failed hardware? How much capacity should be purchased? And what happens when demand suddenly doubles? The problem was not software. The problem was infrastructure. Computing capacity had to be purchased before it could be used. Capital had to be committed before demand was certain. Then the economics changed.
Then computing became something different, a service. You did not need to own the machine. You could rent the capacity, use what you needed, scale when demand increased, reduce when demand disappeared. The economics became radically different. A startup could begin small. A global company could scale enormous infrastructure. Both could access the same fundamental idea: computing on demand, infrastructure as a service. This removed one of the biggest barriers between an idea and a digital business. But whenever a resource becomes easier to access, another question appears: who owns the resource?
The physical world did not disappear. It simply moved behind the interface. Someone still builds the servers. Someone still buys the electricity. Someone still constructs the data centers. Someone still manages the networks. Someone still absorbs the cost of maintaining capacity. The difference is, the customer no longer sees it. A software company can appear almost weightless, but underneath it is an industrial machine. And the larger the cloud becomes, the more infrastructure it can provide. More servers, more regions, more storage, more computing, more services. The cloud begins to look less like a product and more like a utility.
Think about electricity. Most businesses do not build power plants. They connect to the grid. They pay for consumption. They scale usage when necessary. Computing began moving toward a similar model. You do not need to own the entire infrastructure. You need access to it. This changed the economics of software. Capital requirements fell. Deployment became faster. Experimentation became cheaper. Businesses could test ideas without first building an industrial foundation. The cloud became the infrastructure beneath the internet. But there was another consequence. When computing becomes a utility, the utility provider becomes strategically important. And scale creates another advantage. Infrastructure is expensive, but infrastructure at enormous scale can become extraordinarily powerful. Large providers can build capacity across regions. They can standardize operations. They can distribute infrastructure. They can serve thousands of businesses from the same underlying architecture. The customer sees flexibility. The provider sees utilization. The more businesses use the infrastructure, the more efficiently the system can operate. Scale creates economics. Economics create expansion. Expansion creates more capacity, and more capacity attracts more customers. The cloud becomes a flywheel. More customers create more demand. More demand justifies more infrastructure. More infrastructure creates more capacity. More capacity attracts more customers. The cycle reinforces itself, and the cloud provider gains something extremely valuable: scale. But scale is not the only advantage. Once businesses begin building on top of the infrastructure, they accumulate dependencies. Databases live there. Applications run there. Data lives there. Networks connect there. Employees learn the tools. Systems become integrated. The infrastructure becomes familiar, then essential, and eventually expensive to replace. This is the part users rarely see. A digital business may look independent. Its brand is independent. Its employees are independent. Its customers are independent. But its infrastructure may not be. The application runs somewhere. The database lives somewhere. The data is stored somewhere. The computation happens somewhere. And if that somewhere belongs to someone else, the business has acquired a dependency. Not necessarily a weakness, not necessarily a problem, but a structural relationship. The company owns the product. The cloud provider owns the environment. And the deeper the business builds into that environment, the harder the environment becomes to replace. Switching sounds simple. Move the servers, move the data, change the configuration. Done. But modern businesses are more complicated than that. Applications depend on services. Services depend on databases. Databases depend on networks. Teams depend on tools. Processes depend on architecture. Years of decisions accumulate. The dependency becomes embedded. And embedded infrastructure creates switching costs. This is a powerful economic mechanism. You do not need to prevent customers from leaving. You only need to make leaving expensive enough that staying becomes rational. The cloud can therefore create something more valuable than usage. It can create permanence. Look at the modern digital economy. Startups, financial platforms, e-commerce, media, artificial intelligence, enterprise software, automation. Behind many of them, there is cloud infrastructure. The applications are different, the businesses are different, the customers are different, but beneath them, the architecture can converge. This creates a new kind of gatekeeper, not a gatekeeper of content, not a gatekeeper of search, a gatekeeper of computing itself. The cloud provider does not need to own the applications. It only needs to provide the environment in which they operate. And this changes the nature of the internet itself. The old internet was built around ownership. Buy the server, build the network, maintain the system. The new internet increasingly operates through access. Rent the computing, rent the storage, rent the database, rent the network, rent the infrastructure. This creates an enormous recurring economy. Businesses pay continuously for the infrastructure beneath their products. The provider earns from the activity of the ecosystem. The ecosystem grows, usage grows, infrastructure expands, and the economic relationship repeats, month after month, year after year. The cloud is not simply where software lives, it is part of the economic model through which software businesses now operate. Now we can see the architecture. At the top, the application, the interface, the brand, the visible business. Below it, services, databases, APIs, computing, storage, networking, data centers, energy, physical infrastructure. The higher layers are visible. The deeper layers are strategic. Because the deeper the dependency, the harder it becomes to remove. This is why infrastructure creates leverage. The customer sees a service. The provider sees the foundation. And whoever owns the foundation can participate in the growth of everything built above it.
So, what really happened when computing moved into the cloud? The internet became easier to build, faster to scale, cheaper to experiment with, more accessible than ever before. But beneath that convenience, a new architecture emerged. Businesses stopped owning as much infrastructure. They started renting access to it. Computing became a utility. The utility became a platform. The platform became infrastructure. And infrastructure created dependency. That does not make the cloud the villain. It makes the cloud important. Because economic power often follows the resources that everyone else needs. The application may be yours, the customers may be yours, the brand may be yours, but the machine beneath it may belong to someone else. And that leads to a much larger question. When an entire economy begins renting its foundations, who ultimately owns the architecture? Because the future of the internet may not be decided by who builds the most applications. It may be decided by who owns the infrastructure underneath them. The internet looks digital from the surface, but its economic architecture is increasingly physical. And the most important part of that architecture may be the part nobody sees.
Nexera. Decoding systems. Architecting wealth.